the start of the movement of God. It began with the arrival of His Spirit. A group of ordinary people became extraordinary. They were empowered to perform miracles, serve others, and push back the darkness. They could not be stopped. The movement of God continues today. You and I are filled with the same Spirit. The will of God is unstoppable.
Good morning. Morning. My name is Rich Joy. I'm one of the pastors here. And as I say good morning, I want to extend a special welcome to kids who are joining us in the service today. You know who you are. Glad that you're able to be in with all the adults today for our time together singing and learning from the Bible and bringing forward some of our gifts a little bit later. We've been going through the book of Acts, the Acts of the Apostles, since the beginning of September. And today we're on chapter 12 of the book of Acts. So if you missed the first 11, you're going to have to go home and read those on your own. You can catch up. And actually, even though 12 is not the end of the book, today as we do chapter 12, we're finishing up our series in Acts. If you want to get the rest of it, you're going to have to go home and read 13 to 28 to finish off the book, because next week we jump into the 4 weeks of Advent, Christmas, and then it's the new year. In a blink, it will be the new year. But today we're thinking about Thanksgiving, and we're going to dive into the Acts chapter 12. And Acts chapter 12 in the book of Acts has a really familiar story. It's the story of Peter getting thrown into prison and then getting miraculously freed from prison by an angel. How many people have heard that story before? All right, quite a few of us. Here's what I want you to know. Especially kids who are with us, when I say story from the Bible, it's not a made-up story. It's a true story. So when we read the Bible and we're reading a story, or I'm telling you a story from the Bible, it's not something someone imagined or dreamed up or made up. It's a real story about real people and real things that happen to these real people. So anytime I say story today, I want you to know that it's not a made-up one, it's a real one. Even though by the time we get to the end of this story, some crazy things, hard to believe things are going to happen. So in this story about Peter, it's in the book of Acts, as the first church grew, Jesus, when he came here, he lived, he died, he rose again, went to heaven, and he left his followers to become the church. And as this church grew, great things happened. But there were also a lot of people who didn't like the church. They didn't like Christians, and they were trying to stop it. So they brought opposition, resistance, punishment, persecution against the Christians who were trying to grow the church and to grow followers of Christ. One of the people who was really did not like Christians and who was bringing this punishment and this trouble was Herod. Herod really hated the Christian movement. He did not like Christians. So he was sending his soldiers out to grab Christians and bring them into prison. What we find in the 12th chapter of Acts is it starts, the first few verses say, Herod was putting Christians in prison. And he was so angry about Christianity and Christians, he took James, the brother of John, and had him killed. He had him put to death. So you may remember James and John. They were followers of Jesus. They were two of his 12 disciples. They were the sons of Zebedee. James and John, sons of Zebedee. Jesus renamed them the sons of thunder. That's the James that Herod grabbed and killed. And the people, so many of the people who didn't like Christianity, they were so happy about it that Herod decided he was going to go and get Peter. He grabs Peter and he puts Peter in prison. So you might remember when Jesus was walking this earth, he had 12 disciples. But anytime he wanted a smaller group to go with him, he always picked Peter, James, and John. Peter, James, and John. They were like his top three. So Herod grabbed James and had him killed. And people were so happy about it, he decided to go after Peter, and he put Peter in prison. And he's planning also to have Peter killed. Herod was an evil man, and he was set to try to stop this movement of Christianity. In fact, kids especially, if you want to read to the end of chapter 12 later when you get home, we're not going to get that far. But here's what happens to Herod. people, he gives a speech. And the people, they're so in love with him. They say, he's not a man, he's a God. He's a God. They start calling Herod God. And instead of Herod saying, no, I'm not God, Herod goes, yes, I'm a God, I'm a God. And God sent an angel and killed him. And the Bible says he died and he was eaten by worms. You read it, it's in there. Now, you adults are probably going, ew, that's disgusting. Why did they put that in the Bible? His whole body was eaten by worms. But you kids, I know what you're thinking. That's really cool. Yeah, he died, he was eaten by worms. So we're not going to get to that today. You can go read that at the end of chapter 12. What I just paraphrased, the story I just told you was the first 3 verses of Acts chapter 12. So we're going to start, we'll read verse 4 and find out what happens to Peter. In Acts 12:4, it says this: after Herod arrested Peter, after arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So I want you to understand what's happening here. It was Passover time. Passover, the word Passover has 2 meanings. It gets used 2 ways. One is the Passover meal, like Jesus was celebrating in the upper room, that Last Supper that he had with his disciples was a Passover meal. You celebrate that on one night. And actually, by the end of our time together, we're going to remember that in communion with the bread and the cup, the Passover meal. Passover also referred to an entire week of celebration. So Passover one night, Passover the whole week. And that week was actually called the celebration of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And what the Jewish people were remembering during that feast was their freedom from Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt. And God sent Moses and set the people free. And on the night they were going to be set free, Moses said to the people, don't put yeast in your bread. You can't wait around. You don't have time to wait for your bread to rise. We're getting out of here now. So take your bread without the yeast, unrisen, unleavened, and let's go. So what they're remembering in this week is that they had to hurry and get out of Egypt. They call it the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. This was a big deal to the Jewish people. So Herod decided it would not be a good time to kill Peter. He was planning to kill Peter, but he couldn't do it during Passover week. So instead, he put Peter in jail to hold him for the week so after Passover he could kill him. That was Herod's plan. And what I just read said he posted 4 teams of 4 guards each. 4 teams. They would rotate over the course of a day. They would each take shifts, always a team of 4. And when that shift was over, another team of 4 would take over. And here's what they did. 2 of them chained themselves to Peter. So Peter had his right arm chained to one soldier, his left arm chained to another soldier. They took all of his clothes off, maybe down to his underwear, and he was chained to the 2 guards. The other 2 guards were posted at the entrance of the prison, making sure no one can get in and out. Herod wanted to make sure Peter had no chance of escape. Chained to 2 guards, 2 more, and they rotated about every 6 hours so that none of the guards got tired. They could all be at the top of their game. They protected Peter during Passover week. Here's what it says. Excuse me. Here's what it says next. In Acts 12, 6 and 7. It says, the night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. I'm going to stop us here before we read 7, because I want you to just think for a minute what it must have been like for Peter. What do you think Peter was thinking in this moment? He's been in prison, maybe not a whole week, but at least several days. Sometime during Passover week, he got arrested. He's chained. He's chained to 2 guards. He can't go anywhere without them. 2 guards watch the door. He's sitting in prison. I think he knows in the back of his mind, Herod's probably going to kill him just like Herod killed James. As I was imagining that, I was thinking, if I were Peter, what would be going through my mind at this point? I'd be thinking, what's going on here? Jesus called me his right-hand man. Jesus changed my name from Simon to Peter, and he said, Peter means rock. And on this rock, you, Peter, I'm going to build my church. How is he building his church if I'm in prison? How is he going to use me to build the church if I die? Why did God let me come in here? Why isn't he getting me out? Can't you see Peter in prison with those thoughts going through his mind? They'd be going through mine. So Peter's in prison, chained between 2 guards, verse 6. And by the way, Do you ever feel like that? Do you ever look at your circumstances in life and feel like Peter? Like maybe you're not chained to 2 guards with the threat of the sword over you, but very often we're in a life circumstance and you say, why am I here? Why isn't God delivering me? Why isn't God changing something? How did I end up here? Why are my circumstances like this and God's not doing anything to fix them? That's the situation Peter was in. Have you ever felt like that? If you have, look at the first word in the next verse. Suddenly. Suddenly. We went from Peter's in prison for days to this word suddenly. Here's what I want to encourage you with. If you're in one of those circumstances where you just say, how did I get here and when is this going to change? You might be this far away from suddenly. I think really often we give up on God right before suddenly. Hang in there a little bit longer because you never know what's going to happen in the next moment. You never know when your story is going to read this. Suddenly, here's what happened. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. Quick, get up, he said. And the chains fell off Peter's wrists. We got to picture this scene, don't we? We got to picture what's happening here. Peter is chained to 2 guards. Peter's sleeping. I don't know what's going on with the guards. The angel appears, a great light shines. You don't see in this passage guards jumping up and going, hey, whoa, hey, what's going on here? What happened to them? So kids, here's what I want to say to you. When you're reading the Bible or you're hearing a Bible story like this told, and it doesn't exactly tell like what happened, it doesn't tell us what happened to the guards. It's okay to imagine it. It's okay to think about it. It's okay to ask these questions like, how did the angel rescue Peter without the guards noticing? Now, I've never been chained up by the arms to 2 soldiers, but I've done stuff with chains. I've towed cars. I've chained things up. When you drop chains, they make a lot of noise. The chains fell off Peter's arms. If these soldiers were dozing, they would have woken up. And there was a bright light flashing. Why didn't they wake up? What did the angel do? Here's the question. What do you think? What did the angel do to those guards so they didn't notice he was rescuing Peter? The answer is not there. This is for us to just think about. So kids and adults, when you're reading the Bible, it's okay to let your mind wander on things like that and just say, hey, I wonder how the angel did that, and to dream about it a little bit. But somehow, the angel knocked the chains off of Peter without disturbing the guards. And then this is actually funny. He whacked Peter on the side. Peter, get up. Come on. We got to go. And it says this next in verses 8 and 9. The angel said to him, put on your clothes and sandals. And Peter did so. Wrap your cloak around you and follow me, the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. So the guards had no idea what was going on. Peter was being rescued, but Peter also had no idea what was going on. He didn't know if he was dreaming, if it was real, if he was seeing some kind of a vision. It's like this movie was playing in his mind. An angel whacked him on the side and said, get up. His chains fell off. When does that ever happen in real life? He said, get your clothes on. We got to go. And they left. Peter doesn't know what's happening, but he goes with it. Here's what it says in verse 10. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. All right. Peter's following this angel. His chains are off. His clothes are on. The 2 guards who were next to him are in a trance or sleeping or whatever. And they walk right past the other 2 guards who are guarding the door, who for some reason don't see or hear them go by. And then they get to the iron gate that closes around the prison, and it opens by itself, like some kind of special effect in a movie. It just opens, and they walk out. They walk out, and it says here that when they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. They walked 1 block, and then the angel disappears. So here's Peter, 1 block away from the prison, in the middle of the street. He doesn't know if he's dreaming, if he's had a vision, if he's really there, or whatever. He's probably pinching himself. I got to see if I'm sleeping or awake. And the angel disappears. And it turns out it really happened. This kind of makes me laugh. It's in verse 11 and 12. It says, then Peter came to himself and said, now I know without a doubt the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen. When this had dawned on him, he's standing out in the street, a block away from the prison, fully dressed, and he's like, oh, wow, this is real. I'm out. And what does he do? What would you do? He goes to the house where the Christians are gathered. He's out, and he knows where they're going to be. It says, when this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. Now, the Bible doesn't say what room this is, but a lot of people who have studied this story, a lot of Bible scholars believe it's very possible it was the same upper room that Jesus had his Last Supper in with his disciples. And this woman, Mary, who owned it, allowed them to use this room when they needed to meet together. But it doesn't really matter where it was. The point is, Peter knew where it was. He knew where to go. So it was a common meeting place. He goes to the house of Mary, and he knocks on the door. This next part is crazy. It's crazy. Verses 13 and 14. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed, she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, Peter is at the door. So picture this. Peter walks to the house of Mary. This is the house. He knocks on the door. Knock, 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 knock. Inside, Rhoda, who was a servant, her job was to answer the door. She goes running to the door. She doesn't swing the door open. Why not? Could be Roman soldiers on the other side. She doesn't know who's over there, if it's a group of soldiers coming to arrest everybody. So she probably said, who is it? It's me, Peter. Rhoda recognizes his voice. It's Peter. Everybody, it's Peter. She doesn't open the door. She leaves him standing there. It's just so funny. I love the Bible because it's so real. It tells the story the way it really happens, not the way you would write it if you were writing a really clean story. So she goes running in, and she tells all the people who are gathered there praying for Peter, Peter is at the door. How do you think they responded? The next verse says, verse 15, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind, they told her. When she kept insisting, no, it's Peter. No, it's Peter. They said, yeah, it must be his angel. But Peter kept on knocking. And when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Let's put this whole scene together. Peter gets to Mary's house. Knock, 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 knock. Rhoda, who is it? It's me, Peter. It's Peter. Hey, everybody, Peter's at the door. You're crazy. Peter's in prison. No, he's really Peter. He's at the door. No, it's not. Come on, I'll show you. It would have been much better if she brought Peter with her, but she didn't. So they all finally come to the door. Who is it? It's Peter. They open the door, and it's Peter. He's not in prison. He's at the door. And it says in that passage, they were astonished. Do you know what that word means, astonished? In the original Greek, it has several different meanings. I want to read a couple of them to you so you can really feel what these people felt when they were standing at the door, and it was Peter, and he was at the door and not in prison. They were astonished, amazed, astounded. They were beside themselves. They were dumbfounded. They lost their minds. They were flabbergasted, speechless, at a total loss to explain how Peter was there. That's what that word astonished means. It's used a couple other places in the New Testament too. I'm going to just share two. There are more than two. Here's one. Do you remember the story? And when I say story, adults, I mean this really happened. It's not a made-up story, right? Do you remember the story of Jesus was in the house teaching one day, and it was so crowded you couldn't get close to the house? And there were 4 people who climbed up on the roof. They made a hole, and they lowered a friend down through the hole who was paralyzed. He couldn't walk. They lowered him down on a stretcher right in front of Jesus. And when Jesus saw him, he looked at the young man, and he said, young man, your sins are forgiven. And the religious leaders over here said, you can't forgive sins. Who said you have the power to forgive sins? And Jesus said, just so you know that the Son of Man has power to forgive sins, I say to you, young man, stand up and walk. And that man stood up, And he picked up his mat and he walked away. And you know what it says about the people? They were astonished. That's what it says there. Same word. They were flabbergasted. They were dumbfounded. They were beside themselves. They were speechless. They were at a total loss to explain how that just happened. Want another one? Jesus sent his disciples across the sea in a boat. And you know the story, a real story. The waves start to roll. The wind starts to blow. Huge storm. Disciples think they're going to go down with the boat. And the next thing you know, here they see Jesus walking across the water toward them. Now, in one account, we hear that Jesus and Peter have a little time together on the water. But when Jesus gets back in the boat, the waves go perfectly still. The sea is like glass, and the wind stops blowing. And you know what the disciples were? Astonished, flabbergasted, speechless, at a total loss to describe how this just happened. Got the word? Now, Peter's at the door. These people who have been praying for Peter's release come to the door, they open it. Peter's standing there, and they were astonished that he was there. As I read through this story, I saw two halves. You have the first half of the story, Peter goes to prison. You have the second half of the story, the angel sets him free, right? Two big chunks, two halves. There's one verse, I skipped it, verse 5. There's one verse right in the middle that's like the hinge for those two parts. Both of those halves of the story swing on that hinge. It's the key verse in this story. I skipped it so we can come back to it now. Verse 5, let me read it. The first half of the story, Peter's in prison. The second half of the story, he's miraculously released. And right in between, it says this: so Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. So what happened between Peter in prison and Peter getting released is the church was praying earnestly for him. That was my big take home this week as I studied this passage. I love the story. I love both sides of the story, of imagining how hard it was for Peter to be in prison, imagining that whole crazy release with the angel. But the thing that spoke to me the most, inspired me and convicted me, was that verse that said the church was praying earnestly for him. That means they got together for the sole purpose of praying for Peter in prison. That's why they were together. They were praying things like, oh God, please protect our brother Peter. Don't let harm come to him while he's in prison. Give him peace. Can you imagine praying like this? Be his peace of mind, be his peace of heart. And God, do something to release him. Don't let Herod kill him. That's what they're praying this. God, please set our brother Peter free. And then when Rhoda says, Peter's at the door, they said, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. Couldn't be. Here's the reality that hits me with that is sometimes I pray like that, where I'm praying for something and I'm asking God for something, but I would just be shocked if he actually did it. Right? If he really come through. Sometimes I don't pray expecting. Sometimes I don't pray believing. I'm just praying because I'm checking it. I got to pray. I got to pray. I don't think God's actually going to do anything. I'm not saying that they were like that in that room. They were praying earnestly, the Bible said. But how did it happen that Peter showed up at the door and they're like, nah, couldn't be. Can't be him. I find myself like that sometimes in prayer. And here's my conclusion. Maybe this would be yours too. I don't want to be apathetic in prayer. I want to be astonished. I do. I want this experience. I want to be here praying for Peter's release, and when I open the door, he's there and I'm astonished. Obviously, I can't pray for Peter. That's over. But in my prayer life, I want to pray eagerly. I want to pray with faith. I want to pray believing. And when God does something, I just want to be astonished by it, befuddled, bewildered at a lack of explanation for how this thing happened. And God will do that. What this reminded me of is God is still a God who hears us. God is still a God who answers prayer. We can't take it lightly. We've got to pray, believing that God is listening, that God loves us, that he's a God who gives good gifts to his children, who wants to hear us, who wants to help. The verse in Hebrews came back to my mind that said, let us go into the throne of grace with confidence and receive mercy in our day of need. God invites us to him. He wants us to pray, and he wants to listen, and he wants to answer. And they did this together. There was, in the YouVersion app this past week, how many people use that app? The Bible app on your phone? I do it. It's, it's got a daily Bible reading and usually a 2-minute video devotion, and I do it every day as part of my time with God. And this past week, there was a woman on, I can't remember her name, but I remember her story. She worked for Samaritan's Purse. She introduced herself that way. Now, if you make the connection, but Samaritan's Purse is the organization we partner with to deliver these boxes to children around the world. Her story was she lived in a country where it was illegal to be a Christian. It was illegal. And she received one of these boxes. She said, as a child, I got one of these. And she said, when I opened it up, there was a wonder in my heart. She said, I felt like not only did somebody care for me, there's a God in heaven who cares for me. And of course, the devotional was an encouragement to do these boxes. But there was a bigger message there, because she also said this: it's illegal to be a Christian in her land where she grew up. But there was a pastor in the area who wanted to reach children. So he put into place every Saturday a story time at his house. You couldn't teach the Bible. You couldn't have church. You couldn't preach. So he called it story time for children. What he didn't tell everyone was he was telling Bible stories. So 12 children every Saturday went to this pastor's house and heard Bible stories. But the reason I'm telling you all this is the part that hit me so hard. Excuse me. She said her pastor prayed for 4 hours every Saturday morning for those 12 children before they came to story time. 4 hours. I have to be honest, I don't think I've ever prayed 4 hours straight in my life. 4 hours every Saturday for 12 children. And I don't know what happened to 11 of them, probably great things, but one of them did the YouVersion Devo this past week, works for Samaritan Purse, and has an amazing testimony. I have to believe it wasn't just the stories that pastor told, it was the prayer he prayed for those kids. And it just reminded me again, prayer matters. Prayer makes a difference. Sometimes I forget that prayer makes a difference. I think it's the add-on. I think it's the thing we're supposed to do, so we can check the box and say, I prayed. But this story about Peter and that woman's story about her pastor reminded me differently that prayer matters and it makes a difference. And I started to say, and this church did it together. They met in that room together, and they prayed together, and they asked the God of heaven together to free their brother Peter. And here's the encouraging news for you today. There's something like that we're doing together. Since the beginning of September, I've been inviting all of us to pray for one person that you would like to have an encounter with God, that you would like to meet Jesus, to know this glorious grace and love that God has for them. And we've all been praying for just one person. I've been praying for one. You've been praying for one. And we made a prayer mosaic. We took 4-inch tiles and wrote the name on the back. Everyone wrote the name on the back of the person they're praying for, painted the front, and then our creative team put that together into a beautiful prayer mosaic for everyone. You remember it? Did you notice it's not here? I'm in a forest of Christmas trees today. It's beautiful, right? The prayer mosaic got moved to the hallway, which would track right along the back of our room back here. You should go see it later, because now you can see it up front. There are 370 squares on that mosaic, representing 370 names, 370 people we're praying for so that they could know and discover the love and grace that God has for them. We're doing that together. I'm praying for my one, you're praying for your one, and all of those names are prayed for on that board, and we lift those up. And we're not just doing it to say, check, I prayed for my one. We're doing it because we believe the God of heaven wants to love on those people. That's why we're doing it. So I've been doing this every week. Going to do it again right now. I'm going to stop, take 30 seconds, and you pray for one person you know who you would like to see the love of God lavished on. And you pray that, and then I'll close us up. God, there are people we love or we know that we want to have experienced your love and your grace. And so we lift up the names of these people, written on our mosaic, written on our hearts, on our lips, and our minds. And we do it knowing that somehow, I can't explain it, but somehow, God, you hear every one of those prayers. And you are working an answer to every one of those prayers. So we trust you, we believe in you, and we ask you to move in the lives of these people. In your name, Lord Jesus, amen. We're also doing another thing all together. We're doing this. So these are bags of food and Operation Christmas Child boxes that were brought forward during the first service. This is about half because we started sending some of them out already. So there was a mound here about twice this big. And I'm going to invite you to do the same in a moment. And while I explain it, I'm going to call our worship team back up here. They're going to lead us through some songs while we do it. And I'm going to give you some directions for how we're going to do this. If you have a box for a child, you're going to bring it up here. If you have bags of groceries, they can go to either side. If you're bringing a gift card, there's a basket out on a table on each end. You can put your gift card in there. And then we're going to do a second thing together. We're going to celebrate communion. We're going to remember Jesus' gift to us. So I'm going to have just past that table on both sides an elder with a communion tray. After you drop off your gift, stop and pick up a communion cup and bring it back to your seat. Now, if you didn't come prepared to make one of these offerings, I still want you to come forward and get your communion cup. If for any reason you're not able to come forward, before we take communion, I'll say, raise your hand and we'll bring you one. We want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to have that. So a couple of logistical directions. If when you're coming forward, you can make your way forward up one of these three aisles, the middle one, and those two, then we have people coming this way, get your communion cup and go back that way, and we don't have a big traffic jam in the middle. Do that. It'll give us a nice flow. But probably more important than how we're bringing this forward is the why and what's in your heart. I think we could all agree that this isn't an act of self-promotion or pride. We're not doing it to make me feel better, like, hey, I helped somebody. Look what I did. I brought a bag of groceries for a poor family. We're collecting this food because sometimes someone needs a hand. We're collecting this food because we're recognizing God has given us so much. This is a drop in the bucket compared to everything God has done for us and what Jesus has done for us. This is just a small expression of gratitude and giftedness. We're taking a little bit of what God has given to us and we're going to share it with someone else. This is an act of worship. So here's how I want you to do it. When you bring your gift forward, be praying for the recipient of it. You don't know who they are. I don't either. I mean, I know families. I know kind of where they're going. But you don't know who's going to get your bag or your box. But God does. So you pray while you carry that forward. God, would you just bless the person who receives this? That they would know you love them. And make it an act of worship. Bring it forward with that kind of heart. And leave it here. I'm going to have a couple helpers right here who can help you get your items in the right place. And as I said, elders at both ends where you can pick up communion cups and then go back to your seats. Wait when you get back there with your cup. I'll get back up here after and lead us through communion. And Luke, you're going to lead us through, I forgot what song, but there is one.
How Deep the Funds.
Yeah, that one. And as soon as I say go, that's when the chaos starts. Whenever Luke and the team start playing, you can start making your way forward. And would my helpers also come forward, please?